The sky above Manchester turned an unnatural shade of grey, casting long shadows across the research centre's windows. Emily Wright stood motionless, her green eyes fixed on the flickering screens that displayed humanity's worst nightmare unfolding. Reports came in from every corner of the globe, silent, terrifying, and increasingly desperate. Distant star systems were vanishing, entire civilizations wiped out in mere hours by an unknown alien force. Communication networks crackled with fragments of final transmissions, each more chilling than the last. Emily wasn't just any military strategist. She was the daughter of a retired naval officer, raised on stories of human courage and resilience. Her father had always told her that when the world seems darkest, hope becomes the most powerful weapon. The research center buzzed with nervous energy. Scientists and military personnel moved like ghosts, their faces pale and drawn. Computer screens displayed maps showing the rapid spread of the alien invasion. Red zones consuming peaceful planets like a hungry fire. "We're tracking something unprecedented," Dr. James Miller, her lead scientific advisor, muttered. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the complex monitoring equipment. "These aren't traditional invasions. It's like entire civilizations are being absorbed." Emily understood what he meant. The report suggested something far more terrifying than simple destruction. Planets weren't just being conquered, they were being stripped of their individual identities, their collective consciousness somehow integrated into something larger and more horrifying. Outside, the streets of Manchester began to change. People moved differently, slower, more cautiously. The usual bustling city seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Children were kept indoors. Public spaces grew quiet. An unspoken fear had settled over everything. Military communications became fragmented. Entire defense networks were going silent. Countries that once boasted of their technological superiority now seemed like children facing an incomprehensible threat. Emily remembered her training. She had been prepared for conventional wars, for human conflicts with predictable strategies. But this was something entirely different. The alien force seemed to move with a collective intelligence that defied all previous understanding of warfare. "We need a different approach," she told her team. Her voice was calm, steady, a beacon of hope in the growing darkness. "Everything we know about fighting, about resistance, needs to be reconsidered." The research center became a crucible of human innovation. Scientists worked around the clock, analyzing every fragment of information. They studied the patterns of invasion, looking for weaknesses, for any possible point of resistance. Young soldiers gathered, their faces a mixture of fear and determination. They knew they were facing something beyond their comprehension, but they also knew they represented humanity's last line of defense. As night fell, Emily continued working. Maps, data streams, and complicated mathematical models covered her workspace. She understood that this was more than a military challenge. This was a test of human spirit, of our ability to adapt and survive. Her younger brother Mark, a communications specialist, brought her a cup of coffee. "We'll figure this out," he said, his hand briefly touching her shoulder. Those simple words carried more weight than any complex military strategy. The invasion was silent, methodical, and seemingly unstoppable. But humanity had something the aliens might not understand: hope, individual creativity, the ability to find solutions in the most unexpected places. Emily looked out the window. The grey sky seemed to hold both threat and promise. Somewhere out there, humanity would find its answer. They always had. Her fingers traced a complex pattern on the computer screen. Something was forming in her mind, a strategy that didn't follow traditional military thinking. Her approach that celebrated human unpredictability. "We are not defeated," she whispered to herself. The words felt like a promise, like a prayer. Outside, the first stars began to appear. They seemed to twinkle with a promise of their own, that, no matter how dark things might seem, light always finds a way to break through. The silent invasion continued. But humanity was just beginning to fight back. Universal message: hope is our most powerful weapon when facing the unknown. Major Thomas Parker stared at the military briefing maps, his weathered hands tracing the red zones of alien conquest. Each Marker represented another fallen civilization, another world stripped of its individual identity. The traditional military strategies lay in ruins, useless against an enemy that thought and moved as a single collective intelligence. In the underground, training facility beneath Manchester, something extraordinary was taking place. Emily Wright had proposed a radical approach that seemed impossible, turning human unpredictability into a weapon. Emotions are not weakness, she told the gathered soldiers. They are our greatest strength. The training was unlike anything the military had ever attempted. Soldiers were taught to embrace their individual quirks, to think beyond logical patterns. They practiced random decision-making, emotional responsiveness and creative problem-solving that defied standard military protocols. Lieutenant Robert Clark watched as seasoned soldiers learned to break every rule they'd ever been taught. Veteran of multiple conflicts, he initially thought Emily's approach was madness, but as days passed, he began to see something remarkable happening. During one training exercise, soldiers were given impossible scenarios. Instead of following standard tactical responses, they were encouraged to react with pure, unfiltered human emotion. A young soldier named Peter Thompson solved a complex tactical problem by doing something so unexpected that it shocked everyone. He sang a childhood nursery rhyme mid-simulation, creating a moment of complete cognitive disruption. The aliens process information like a perfect machine, Emily explained to the skeptical military commanders. But machines can't understand human randomness. Our ability to be unpredictable is our greatest defense. The research team worked tirelessly. They analyzed every piece of data from the alien invasions, looking for patterns of weakness. Dr. James Miller discovered something fascinating. The alien collective intelligence struggled when confronted with pure emotional input. It's like they have a firewall that can't process genuine human emotion, he told Emily. Anger, joy, sudden burst of creativity. These completely break their communication networks. Training intensified. Soldiers learned to weaponize their individual experiences. A musician could interrupt a tactical sequence with a sudden musical phrase. An artist might solve a military problem through a completely unexpected creative approach. Thomas Parker watched his most disciplined soldiers transform. They were no longer just military personnel. They were becoming something entirely new. Human beings who understood that their individuality was their most powerful weapon. The facility buzzed with an energy that was both terrifying and hopeful. Outside, the world continued to fall silent. Cities grew quiet. Communication networks flickered with uncertainty. But here something different was brewing. Emily worked day and night refining the training protocols. Her own experiences, growing up with a military father who taught her to think differently, had prepared her for this moment. She understood that humanity's survival depended on embracing what made them unique. We are not fighting a conventional war, she told the soldiers during a critical briefing. We are protecting the very essence of what makes us human, our ability to feel, to create, to be unpredictable. Young soldiers began to understand their individual stories, a farmer's intuition, a painter's creative vision, a musician's emotional depth became their most powerful weapons. They were learning to see their differences not as weaknesses, but as strengths. Thomas watched a simulation where a group of soldiers solved a complex tactical challenge by using a combination of dance, musical improvisation, and emotional storytelling. It was beautiful, chaotic, and completely incomprehensible to a logical system. As weeks passed, the training facility became a beacon of hope. They weren't just preparing for war, they were redefining what it meant to be human in the face of an overwhelming emotionless threat. Outside, the world waited. The silent invasion continued. But something was changing. Humanity was no longer just defending itself. It was preparing to fight back in the most human way possible, with creativity, emotion, and an unbreakable spirit of individuality. Universal message. Our differences are not weaknesses, but our most powerful form of resistance. The first psychological counterattack began on a quiet Tuesday morning in Manchester. Lieutenant Robert Clark stood before a small team of carefully trained soldiers, each one a living testament to human unpredictability. Their mission seemed impossible. They would be the first to test whether human emotional complexity could truly disrupt the alien collective intelligence. The entire world watched with silent anticipation. The team consisted of 6 individuals who could not have been more different. There was Peter Thompson, a former elementary school teacher with an extraordinary ability to read emotions. Sarah Williams, a professional dancer whose body moved with incredible spontaneity. Michael Roberts, a jazz musician who could create complex improvisational patterns in seconds. Emma Johnson, a painter who saw the world in colors and unexpected connections. David Anderson, a chef whose creativity knew no bounds. And James Brown, a computer programmer who had learned to think beyond logical algorithms. They wore standard military gear, but something about them was fundamentally different. Their eyes sparkled with a unique energy, pure human creativity, waiting to be unleashed. The alien communication network appeared as a massive, perfect grid on their monitoring screens. It was beautiful in its symmetry, terrifying in its completeness. Every piece of information moved with mathematical precision, each signal connecting perfectly, without a single moment of chaos. "We're going to introduce pure human randomness," Robert told his team. Their first approach was almost laughable in its simplicity. Peter began to sing a children's nursery rhyme. Sarah started an unexpected dance movement. Michael played a complex jazz improvisation. Emma painted rapid, meaningless color patterns. David created a bizarre culinary combination in the tactical simulation. James wrote code that purposely included emotional variables. The alien network flickered. For the first time since the invasion began, the perfect communication grid showed signs of disruption. The mathematically precise signals began to break, creating tiny cracks in the seemingly impenetrable system. Monitoring stations around the world watched in disbelief. Scientists who had spent years studying traditional warfare suddenly understood something profound. Human unpredictability was a weapon more powerful than any missile or bomb. The team's actions created what researchers would later call emotional interference, a completely new form of psychological warfare that no logical system could anticipate or defend against. Reports came flooding in from other training centers. Soldiers were no longer just fighting. They were celebrating their humanity. Each unique individual became a potential weapon against the collective intelligence. Emily Wright watched the initial results with tears in her eyes. This was more than a military strategy. This was a declaration of human spirit. "We are not just defending ourselves," she told the military commanders. "We are proving that individual creativity is our most powerful survival mechanism." The alien invasion had assumed that logic and collective thinking would always triumph. They had not understood the power of human emotion, of individual experience, of the beautiful chaos that defines human existence. As days passed, more teams were trained. They came from different backgrounds: artists, musicians, teachers, chefs, programmers. Each brought their unique perspective, their individual way of seeing the world. The psychological battlefield was not about destruction. It was about celebration. Celebration of what makes humans beautifully, wonderfully different. Military training centers transformed. They were no longer cold, logical places. They became spaces of creativity, of emotional exploration, of understanding. That our differences are our greatest strength. Thomas Parker, who had initially been skeptical, now watched with pride. The soldiers were not just fighting, they were proving something fundamental about human potential. Outside, the world continued to change. Cities that had grown quiet now buzzed with a new energy. People understood that their individual stories, their unique experiences, were not weaknesses to be hidden, but powerful tools to be celebrated. The alien invasion had intended to strip away individual identity. Instead, they had awakened humanity's most profound strength, our ability to be beautifully, perfectly imperfect. As night fell, Robert and his team celebrated their small victory. They were not just soldiers, they were guardians of human potential. Universal message: our individual differences are our most powerful form of collective strength. Dr. Elizabeth Harris worked tirelessly in her small laboratory, surrounded by complex equipment and walls covered with intricate diagrams. Her breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, When most of the world had almost given up hope, the neural firewall technology wasn't just a scientific discovery, it was a lifeline for human survival. Each protection mechanism was more than a technological solution. It was a celebration of human individuality. Elizabeth understood something profound. This wasn't just about stopping an alien invasion. This was about protecting the very essence of human experience, our ability to feel, to dream, to be unpredictably beautiful. Her team worked around the clock. Young researchers from different backgrounds brought their unique perspectives. Musician would suggest a rhythm-based encryption. An artist would introduce color-coded emotional barriers. A chef would contribute understanding of complex flavor interactions that translated into protection algorithms. The first batch of neural defense packages looked nothing like traditional military equipment. They were colorful, almost playful. Each package contained not just technical protection, but stories of human resilience. Personal narratives that celebrated individual human experiences. Emily Wright visited the production facility, her eyes filled with hope. "We're not just creating a defense," she told Elizabeth. "We're creating a declaration of human spirit." Production began in secret locations across Manchester. Abandoned factories transformed into protection mechanism production centers. Workers who had lost their previous jobs now became guardians of human potential. The neural firewall worked differently from anything previously conceived. Where traditional systems blocked information, these new protections celebrated individual human experiences. They didn't just defend, they transformed incoming alien signals into bursts of pure human creativity. Thomas Parker watched the first successful tests with disbelief. Soldiers who received the neural protection seemed more alive. Their movements were more fluid, their thinking more dynamic. They weren't just protected, they were enhanced. "It's like they've been given a superpower," he told Elizabeth during a briefing. "The power of being purely, beautifully human." Across remaining human colonies, hope began to spread. These weren't just protection mechanisms, they were stories of survival. Each package told a different tale, a farmer's wisdom, a child's imagination, a grandmother's resilience. The alien collective had assumed that humanity could be conquered. They're through pure logic. They had not understood that human experience cannot be reduced to mathematical equations. Young soldiers began receiving training that went beyond traditional military protocols. They learned to celebrate their differences. A painter learned tactical strategies. A musician understood complex communication techniques. Her chef developed unexpected problem-solving skills. Elizabeth watched her creation spread. It was more than technology. It was a movement. In small towns and big cities, people started sharing their stories. Personal experiences became a form of resistance. An old man's memories became a protection mechanism. A child's drawing transformed into a complex defensive algorithm. The neural firewall production became a global celebration. People from different backgrounds contributed. A textile worker would suggest a pattern. A dancer would introduce a movement sequence. A computer programmer would develop an unexpected code. Emily's team spread these protection mechanisms across remaining human territories. They weren't just fighting, they were proving humanity's extraordinary potential for adaptation and survival. As weeks passed, something remarkable happened. The neural firewall didn't just protect against alien invasion, it transformed human understanding of their own potential. "We are not just defending," Elizabeth would tell her team, "we are evolving." The rainy Manchester laboratory became a beacon of hope. Complex equipment hummed with possibilities. Walls covered with diagrams told stories of human potential. Outside, the world waited. The alien invasion continued, but something fundamental had changed. Humanity was no longer just surviving. They were preparing to thrive. Universal message. Our individual experiences are our most powerful form of collective protection. The story continued, a testament to human creativity, resilience, and the extraordinary power of embracing our differences. The final confrontation approached like a storm gathering on a distant horizon. Emily Wright stood on the command deck, her green eyes reflecting the complex holographic displays. that showed humanity's last stand against the alien collective. Years of preparation had transformed humanity. They were no longer just fighting. They were redefining the very concept of consciousness. The alien Zorian collective faced something they could never have anticipated, a species that refused to be controlled, categorized, or conquered. The battle wasn't about weapons or technology. It was about the fundamental nature of existence. Thomas Parker watched the initial engagement with a mixture of fear and hope. The human defenders moved differently now. They weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. They were living, breathing, representations of human potential. Each team member brought something unique. Peter Thompson, the former teacher, used emotional communication techniques that completely disrupted alien signal patterns. Sarah Williams introduced dance-like movements that created unexpected cognitive interference. Michael Roberts used musical improvisation as a form of tactical communication. The aliens approached with their usual mathematical precision. Their collective intelligence had conquered thousands of civilizations. They expected the same predictable surrender. But humanity had other plans. The first wave of attack came with perfect alien calculation. Massive energy signals swept across defensive lines. But instead of meeting traditional resistance, they encountered something entirely unexpected. Human defenders responded with pure, unfiltered creativity. Where the aliens expected logical counterattacks, they received bursts of emotional energy. A soldier would suddenly sing. Another would paint a rapid image. Someone else would tell a childhood story. The alien collective's communication network began to fracture. Elizabeth Harris watched from the research center. Her neural firewall technology had prepared humanity for this moment. Each defender carried protection mechanisms that celebrated individual human experience. "We are not just fighting," Emily told her team. "We are showing them the power of being human." The battle looked chaotic to traditional military observers. There were no straight lines, no predictable formations. Human defenders moved with a fluid, unpredictable energy that defied all standard combat strategies. The alien collective began to experience something they had never encountered before: genuine confusion. Their perfect information processing systems couldn't interpret the random emotional responses. A young soldier named James Brown discovered something extraordinary during the conflict. By introducing completely unexpected emotional variables into communication signals, he could create massive disruptions in the alien network. Hours turned into days. The confrontation was unlike any previous conflict in human history. It wasn't about destruction. It was about demonstrating the power of individual experience. The Zorian collective faced an existential crisis. Their entire understanding of conquest was being challenged. They had assumed that collective intelligence would always triumph over individual experience. They were wrong. Humanity showed them something profound: individual creativity, emotional depth, and the ability to be beautifully unpredictable were not weaknesses. They were the most powerful form of resistance. As the final moments approached, something remarkable happened. The alien collective began to fragment. Their perfect, synchronized intelligence couldn't process the pure, chaotic energy of human experience. Emily watched the holographic displays with a sense of wonder. This wasn't just a military victory. This was a celebration of human potential. The battle concluded not with destruction, but with a profound transformation. The Zorian collective was forced to recognize that some species cannot be conquered. Some experiences cannot be categorized or controlled. In the quiet aftermath, humanity had proven something fundamental. Our differences, our ability to feel, to dream, to be beautifully unexpected. These were our greatest strengths. The world would never be the same. Universal message. Individual human experience is the most powerful force in the universe. As silence settled over the command deck, a new chapter of human history began. A chapter defined by creativity, resilience, and the extraordinary power of being uniquely human.